Well, welcome. We are nearing the end of our 150 episode run for Curiosity, Not Judgment. Today is episode 149. We are so pleased to have you listening or watching. Welcome to the show.
Welcome indeed. I'm Gary.
And my name is Birga. And for those of you that have been following us for any length of time, know that every single episode we bring up a topic that has just somehow impacted us personally in the last number of days and begin to generate some curious questions around them, and trusting that so many of our listeners or viewers are finding themselves in similar circumstances, maybe different details, but that we all have some commonality that we can find through these curious questions in embarking to really improve our situations, our relationships, and our circumstances.
And that is the same today. We actually have two topics, and we've put one on deck for next week unless something better comes up. And we're going to deal with the other one today. So we each came with one today. They're both compelling, and so we're going to do one today and one next week.
Absolutely. So, kind of in a nutshell, what we wanted to talk about today was just that principle of not doing what we should be doing, and then conversely, doing what we shouldn't be doing. Why? And what are the curious questions that we can generate around those two topics?
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier this week. When anytime you have a review at work, what is it really focused on? It's what are the things that you're not doing that you're supposed to do, or what are you doing that you're not supposed to do, right? And any organization has something around that, whether it's the church talking about sins or sins of omission, whether it's other organizations that help you, that where you're trying to grow, that talk about character defects versus shortcomings. It's just it's a very common in the human experience that we all kind of do things that we wish we hadn't done, or that other people wish we hadn't done.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's things that we want to do and don't do, and or other people think we should do and don't do, right? So there's a kind of a three-dimensional matrix here, right? It's things that we think that we or wish we wouldn't do, or wish we would do, or wish is a wishy word, but and then there's things that other people think that we shouldn't do and should do. And so all that mixed in together, I am absolutely positive we come up some curious questions around all that.
Absolutely. So, we've talked about in over the past number of years, even about New Year's resolutions, creating habits, trying to set ourselves up for success with productive ways of working and eating and living. And so maybe I might lump that in the category of things we should be doing that perhaps we're not. But I think we have talked about this a fair amount, that we all know theoretically, we should be consuming probably less calories, should be consuming different types of calories, being more active in body and mind, and all of these things that we could really concentrate on doing to make ourselves the healthiest, best version of ourselves. And yet we tend to not do them because it is so much easier to sit on the sofa and watch something on TV.
Yeah, and or eat that plate of food in front of you. I was relating to you earlier, and this just happened last night. I'm at one of our favorite Mexican restaurants, and sharing really good family time. And I had my plate, and I had my wife's plate, and she only ate about half of hers. And instead of eating half of mine and stopping and taking the rest home for another meal, I ate all of mine and half of hers. And then this morning I woke up going, "Why did I do that?
Mm-hmm.
What's the deal?" Now, it did motivate me to exercise a little bit more this morning, which is great. But, why did I do that in the first place? I think we can always do that. Now that you mentioned that, though, I really want to bring something up that I think is very germane to that. And that is the difference between guilt and shame.
Mm.
And I think we've talked about this before, but I think it really comes into play here. If I was into shame, so the difference is, I love Brene Brown. Is that her name? She has a great definition of that, and that is, guilt is something that I did, and I did something wrong, or I did something that was wrong. And shame is, I am wrong, or I did something that was bad, or I am bad.
Right.
And I want to differentiate that right up top, because if a good example of what happened to me over the last 14 hours, if I was in shame, I would have said, oh, this is terrible, this is who I am, and I would have gone to the refrigerator and gotten some ice cream, right?
Mhm.
But guilt said, okay, you know what, it formed a conviction that I can do better, and I will do better today. Every day is a new day,
Mhm.
and I'm going to go do a little more exercise to try to counteract the calories I did last night. And so those are two different things,
Yeah.
right? And so it's very important as we think about this, the things that we do that we shouldn't do, and the things we don't do that we should do, that we don't ever want to go into shame. We want
Right.
to, worst case, go into guilt, and then have that even be short lived
Right.
as a conviction towards the positive.
Yeah. Catalyst towards behavior change.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you want to unpack this live time, but I think you asked the question of yourself this morning, why did I do that? And I think that is the probably linchpin question for so many of us. But coming up with the answer is not necessarily an easy task.
No. And we can talk about the psychology of, my parents always made me finish my plate when I was a kid, and we can do all that.
Mhm.
But the fact of the matter is that last night I sat there looking at my food going, I should probably just wrap this up, ask for a box, and take my wife's food and my food and go home. And then I thought, it's here. I probably won't eat it in the future. I'll probably throw it away. I don't like to waste, and I just ate it.
Hmm.
And those are just silly things. So this goes to in this dichotomy that we're talking about, doing things that we do that we shouldn't do, and we're going to say this so many times, I think I get it right, and not doing things I should do. I tend to justify the things that I do that I shouldn't do, and I tend to be in denial and
Mm.
or legitimately don't see as a blind spot the things that I should do that I don't do.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a pairing of in the dichotomy of justification and denial when
Yeah.
we talk about the defects and the shortcomings.
Yeah. So, we can do a lot of introspection around this, and I think it requires that timely introspection when we come up against a situation where we are frustrated with ourselves, either for action or inaction, and start to look at our past, look at our stories, look at the things that make us behave the way that we do. But we have to then figure out some tools. The questioning is good and it's important, starting with why did I do that or why did I not do that? Begin to go down then that rabbit trail of the subsequent questions. We talked in the past about the 5 whys, continuing to ask why 5 times until you get to a kind of a baseline truth. But then when you've gotten to that place, when you've arrived at that level of understanding, then what? And how do you pivot behavior? How do you pivot mentality? And how do you set yourself up for success in the future?
So I'm a big team player person. Now I'm a connector, so this doesn't work for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But what other people think about me matters, right or wrong. So how do I turn that into a positive? The first thing I'm going to do, and I did it this morning, is turn to my wife and said, I don't want to do that in the future. Could you please just kick me under the table next time? Now, it's not that it's her responsibility. I'm not putting it on her. I'm just saying, hey, next time if you can help me, I'm make I'm making myself accountable to you
Mm.
that I don't want to do this again in the future, or not as much as I'm doing it now. So let's, say something to me, because that little catalyst will probably, I had the thought anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that little catalyst would probably push me over the edge.
Mm.
Now, if I'm going to do that, I can't get mad at her when she
Yes.
does it. And I can't say, oh, leave me alone or whatever, right? I
Mm-hmm.
have to, I have to respect that if I'm going to ask her to do that. And again, I don't want to do this. I'm not talking about a dysfunctional relationship where I'm depending on her or she's enabling me or not, or being I have to have her or I can't do it on my own. But accountability is a good way to do it. My best forms of exercise over my life was team sports,
Mm.
because I had to show up.
Yeah.
I
They're
started the
counting on you.
softball team at Intel. I was on sand volleyball teams. I was because everybody, look, if I don't show up, then the whole team fails,
Yeah.
right? And so that was always my way of making sure I got exercise, because me motivating myself to get to the gym just wasn't going to happen. Right.
Mm.
And so knowing yourself to lead yourself as these things go is a big part of this.
Well, so I think that brings up a good header for the next series of questions about around what is your motivators. If it's avoiding disappointing others or the goal of pleasing others, you know, I think we do have to ask, is that a healthy motivator? And that's a whole other string of questions. But if we know that, people pleasing in whatever capacity is a strong motivator, can we use that in a positive way to either reach success in a goal that we want to see or to cut out a behavior that we don't?
Yeah, and if you read the folks, and I think the author of Atomic Habits, which is probably the current best reference on habits and things like this, but and building good habits, he will say, only tell the people who support you in
Mm,
when you're going to ask for accountability. Don't tell people that aren't going to support you, they'll just sabotage you, right? And so
yeah.
that's an important part of this. But yeah, I feel like my connecting to other people, which has a couple of symptoms, both good and bad, right? I can make friends easily when I walk into a room. I
Mhm.
can make people feel comfortable. I can build trust. I can do collaboration and innovation. Then better than most folks. On the other hand, it comes with that pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other. It comes with a little bit of that people pleasing aspect. And so what I'm trying to do is make lemonades with that lemon and say, hey, accountability is probably one of my best tools. And,
Mhm.
and telling someone that I intend to do this is probably one of my best tools.
Yeah. So we can ask questions around what is our motivation or what are our motivators? And then conversely, what are our deterrents, right? What are the things that keep us from doing what we need to be doing? And I can say, I feel very justified at the end of a long day to go home and sit on the couch and watch TV. Well, it would certainly be a deterrent if I don't have internet connectivity and none of my apps or my channels or my streaming services are working, right? That would definitely be a deterrent. Do I want to set it up so that I have that built-in deterrent so I'm not watching TV? I'm not ready for that just yet, but you can see where I'm going with that, thinking through, can we build in some deterrents to help us either achieve the goal or stop the behavior?
Yeah. I mean, the best deterrent when we're talking about eating, which is a personal problem for me, is boy, imagine having a nutritionist come to your house and saying, okay, you have full reign of my cabinets and my pantry. Go for it.
Hmm.
And you say, I only want things that are whole foods, right? There was just an article that came out this morning that 70% of the things, even at Whole Foods, which is kind of a funny thing, are ultra processed, right? They're not the grains, fruits, and vegetables that we all say we want to just do. So a deterrent, if you're a snacker of bad things, would be to get rid of all the things in your house and don't buy them in the
Yeah.
future of all those bad things. Now, are you ready for that? Is that can you do that? Now it gets back to how motivated are you?
Mhm.
And it also gets back to setting yourself up for success as a deterrent. You're saying the word deterrent, I think that has a little bit of a negative connotation.
Mhm.
But if you say setting yourself up for success, that accomplishes the same thing, right?
Yeah. You did ask a really important question in the middle though, is, what do I need to do to set myself up for success? And it may
Mm-hmm.
not be all in all at once, right? It may be very gradual baby steps towards the ultimate goal. So maybe you're not going to go throw away 90% of all the things in your cabinet, but maybe you are going to throw away anything that has more than 20 ingredients on the list,
Right, right.
right? And
Start
maybe
slow.
whittle it down.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. As a matter of fact, I was reading over the holiday break about kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese term that says don't try to do it all at once. Do it
Mm.
incrementally each day, and you have a much higher probability of success. So your idea is fantastic. Imagine if you did that. You went through all your cabinets and said, okay, let's pick 15, right? So anything more than 15 ingredients, gone.
Yeah.
And then and that would get rid of probably let's just say a third of your things, hopefully less than that. And then you go from there, and then, do a few weeks of that, and then say, okay, let's go for 10,
Yeah.
and see where it goes. Right. I mean, so I really like that actually as an approach. I think I'm going to do some thinking about that, both on the things that, and I love your action and inaction. That's a really good way to say it, both on my actions and my inactions.
Hmm. We all struggle with different things, and ultra processed foods is not one of mine, but that was a series of decisions I made way back when, right? And so maybe vegging out in front of the TV is not yours. And so I think part of it is also having grace for ourselves, a little bit of vulnerability as we have these conversations, but then maybe engaging in dialogue about how someone else may have had some successes around an issue that you are presently battling, because maybe it is an area where they have had some victory years past and you can glean from their knowledge.
Beautiful statement. I love that, Birga, because other people have struggled with what we are struggling with. We don't come up with anything new, right? It's the same. This is all part of the human condition. So talking to people, and that's another thing that I do as a connector. I will generally do that. If I'm gonna set out and try to do something like that, I'm gonna try to talk to other people who've been successful. Right now in my life, I'm talking to people about retirement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what are you doing these days? I just met with a wonderful friend of mine in Miami on the way back from being out of the country, and we had dinner, and he is just retired, and I said, so what are you doing with yourself? That stuff is really fascinating. So finding out other people's experience and
Yes.
their processes is a really good way to learn some hints and tricks for how to do those things yourself. Now, it gets back to your whole point of this motivation that you said early on, which was really wise. If I'm truly motivated in this day and age, we talk about social media, we talk about the internet, sometimes we talk about that in bad ways. I tell you what, if you do about 20 minutes of research, do a Pomodoro, right? 25 minutes of focused effort on things that people have done and research on the internet or social media, things that people have done to get rid of, let's just pick processed foods, you will come up with millions of ideas,
Yeah.
right? And just, and not, some of them will be good for you, some of them won't. Some you'll say that's ridiculous, some you'll say, oh, that's kind of cool. And pick the easiest ones. Pick the easiest ones with the highest returns.
Yeah.
And while I'm on that, let's not think that, okay, so we all have things that we do that we shouldn't do, actions and inactions. We're not going to get rid of them all at once.
Right.
So how should we prioritize that? That's a good question. Well, maybe the ones that are having the biggest negative impact on us and or our relationships. Well, it's all relationships with ourselves or relationship with others, right? Relationship with our higher power. And so that's the whole point is why do you even need to work on this? Because if you in your own mind, and I do this all the time, if I think, this is no problem, right? It's my guilty little pleasure. How many times do people say, well, my guilty little pleasure is this or whatever? If it's not impacting you and you don't believe it's impacting you, then what's your motivation to change it?
Well, I would play, devil's advocate for a moment. Like if you're introducing something as a guilty pleasure, there is some sense of this is the best thing for me, right? I mean, otherwise
Yes.
you would just say, my habit is I eat a Snickers bar every day before bed, right? You wouldn't introduce it as a guilty pleasure.
Really good point. Yes. And this gets to be back to the whole thing about integrity. You should be able to proudly say, I do this and I don't do that. Or you could say, I guess I'm working on this and I haven't had total success with it yet. But you're right. Saying guilty pleasure is almost like a cop out. It's like you should be saying, nope, I watch reruns of Mike and Molly or whatever. And I'm okay with that because I limit it to half an hour a day of television, and it's good downtime for me where the 3,000 voices in my head go down to 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And that's what I do, right? You shouldn't be leading off with this is a guilty pleasure, right? It's a great point.
Well, I want to come back to something that you said a few minutes ago about how all of these actions or inactions are really about relationship, either with ourselves, our creator, or with others. And so I think that really speaks to motivation, right? If you are battling against your own body, if it's a health concern, hopefully that is elevated in your motivation list. If you are finding that action or inactions are negatively impacting relationship, hopefully that's going to elevate the way that you prioritize action or inaction around something. And so I think it is a great series of questions to really dive in to start to consider, how is this thing impacting my relationships?
Yeah, and and I can tell you. So, um, uh, uh, I'll just tell you one of my problems right now, that I'm focusing on, that I'm thinking about, um, is, as a connector, I make friends easily. As a adult with ADHD, I don't always follow through on every single relationship thing, and I love people. I have a lot of people around me who are really good at that. They always give me a call out of the blue. They text me on my birthday. They do all the things that it takes to maintain a relationship, and I'm not so good at that,
Mm.
right? And so that's a problem for me, right? I'm good at making relationships. I'm not so good at doing the maintenance of relationships in the way that the other people want to have the relationship maintained,
Mm.
right? And so how what can I do there? What are some curious questions around that? Is it impacting my relationships? If it is, what can I do to change? What are some things I'm doing that I shouldn't do? What are some things that I'm not doing that I could do? And
Mhm.
how would I set myself up for success in doing those things or not doing those things that would help in those relationships? One of them for me might be whittling it down from 937,000 relationships to two or three, right?
Mhm.
So, what is important to me, and how should I approach this issue?
Well, I think asking the question about perspective might gain a little help provide a little clarity. So you just said something interesting. Maybe you think you have 1,000 good friends, but how many people would
Mhm.
consider themselves good friends with you?
Right, exactly.
And if the answer is 1,000 versus 10,
Right,
speaks to, width, not depth.
right, exactly.
And so, I think we can all be more introspective on some of these things that we feel like we're really successful in a particular area. Are there some inverse questions that we can ask to consider, I think this about myself, but are other people having the same perspective?
And you bring up a great point, and that is, if we want to find out what is negatively impacting relationships around us, to try to discern what of those actions or inactions that we should actually do something about, who's the best source for that?
Mm,
The
hmm.
people around us, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily ourselves, because again, as I've admitted for myself, I justify my actions and I'm blind to my inactions,
Yeah.
or I'm in denial. And so if that's the case, I need help.
Yep. So I think that puts us at a good place to kind of do our list of questions to just kick this off for everybody that wants to consider how to put this into play, right? So starting with some of the questions of what are the things that I'm struggling with, that I'm doing that I don't want to be? What are some of the things that I'm not doing that I want to be doing? So those action versus inaction, compile a list of those. And then probably second up would be to begin to analyze, what impact are these things having on the people I care about?
Mm-hmm.
How is this impacting relationship, right? And then, is my either justification or denial around these items factual? Do I need to involve other people in the conversation to get an external set of eyes or a different gauge on the situation from people that I trust? And, very early in this episode, you said something about it really has to be people that are for you, not against you. You don't want voices of condemnation and negativity. They're going to always chastise you when you fall, but you instead want people that really do want your best and want to see you lifted up.
Yeah, and that you see that in. There's some people that either claim or actually do want the best for us, who still don't have that effect on us. So
Mm.
the other part of the corollary of that is, and that we feel are for us when we ask them for feedback. And then you said something really interesting there, and I don't want people to listen to these questions and go, oh my God, this sounds like like a 40-day process. I need to quit my job and go do this. I'm visualizing as you're saying that 3-step process. Look, take 5 minutes, 10 minutes max, put 2 columns down, things I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing, things that I'm not doing that I should do. Boom, 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 write it out.
Yeah.
And then with your gut and thinking about, how is this impacting relationships, either to myself or others, and just circle, 1, 2, or 3 of them in each column. Then go to your partner, go to your kids, go to somebody that's for you, and say, hey, what do you think about this?
Mm-hmm. I love it. I think that's a great strategy. And I think the fact that we're having this conversation at the first month of the year really hopefully sets us up with some tools for success as we look at the days ahead and how we really want to alter our behaviors and transition into the best version of ourselves. So I think this was a great topic that you brought up. So I'm appreciative of being able to think through it with you.
I appreciate it too. And I'm actually going to go make my list right now.
Very good. All right. Well, as always, it's a great time to talk and to ask curious questions together. Thank you so much. And we will catch up next week.
Take care.